Hello and welcome. Thank you for tuning in to Goddess Tulsa After Dark. This is where you let your hair down, get you a beverage, prop your feet up or down. Now it's time to hit the like. Are you subscribed? Don't forget to hit that cash app because it's After Dark with the Goddess.
An LGBTQ plus advocacy group, Human Rights Campaign, has announced that 2021 was the deadliest year ever for transgender and gender nonconforming people in the United States. At least 51 transgender or gender nonconforming people in this country died from gunshot or other forms of fatal violence in 2021 alone. That's up from 21 deaths in 2015. According to the report, An Epidemic of Violence, a majority or 84% of victims have been people of color, with Black trans women being especially impacted. In addition to escalating violence against trans people, 2021 also saw a record number of anti-trans legislation. The ACLU reports that over 100 anti-LGBTQ plus laws were proposed in 35 states last year, with most of them targeting trans youth. Joining me to talk about more of these issues is author and organizer Hope Giselle and trans activist and actor Devin Norell. Welcome to the show. Thank you both for joining me. Hope, I'll start with you. What's going through your mind when you hear these reports documenting the rise in violence against trans people?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming out to the Goddess Tulsa show. I'm your host, Queen Tulsa. We're just doing an informative. I ran past this article and I felt that it was prevalent to bring it to you all and let you see. So we'll watch.
Well, I'm not surprised. I can't say that I'm surprised. I can't say that I don't think I'll ever be surprised at the way that the numbers rise every year. And a lot of it is due to the fact that we have social conversations and we have social commentary about the fact that people don't even believe that these things are happening, right? And so the fact that if the social, community at large doesn't believe that these things are happening, then there's obviously not going to be a lot of things that are done to prevent them from happening. So it does not shock me, and that's the sad part about it. Just short and sweet on that one.
Live streaming can be
Devin Norell, I mean, this is challenging to think about, right? Because Hope is saying, well, as long as people are in denial about this thing, it'll keep happening. But how can people be in denial? We have had more conversation about trans communities in the last 5 years than we probably had in the last 20, in terms of the news, in terms of public commentary, in terms of violence. And as underreported as this stuff is, we're talking about it more and more. So how can somebody possibly be in denial?
It's not that they're in denial about our existence. They're in denial about their own sexuality. They're feeling shame for being attracted to folks that are considered different, but we are not different. We are just men and women and non-binary folks. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people now are more willing to explore their sexuality in whatever form that might look like. But then coming back to that and realizing, oh, my community, my Black community doesn't accept me for who I am. And so I am angry, I'm feeling shame. And so I must take this out on the person that I just showed so much love towards. And that's really the frustrating part, is that we feel so much shame that we take it out on the people that we're attracted to. And we need to figure out how to move away from that. That is where we need to end the epidemic. How can we end the denial of our sexuality or who we are?
Devin Monroe, is it particular to the Black community though? Because that becomes part of the conversation as well. You know, you talked about the way that trans folk are treated in our community. Is it markedly different than what we see in white communities and brown communities and other spaces in the United States?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have to think about things like white supremacy, but we also have to think about institutionalized racism and systemic oppression. We have to think about the fact that many white trans people have resources that Black trans people don't have access to. The fact that 51% of Black trans women have reported being homeless. The fact that Black trans people are 3.7 times more likely to be attacked or receiving end of violence by police. These things all play into how we are stigmatized within our community. Inside the Black community, I should say, but also outside of the Black community. And the fact that we don't have these resources to latch onto, the fact that we aren't able to hold on to a job because we're trans, the fact that we aren't able or capable of obtaining housing because we are trans, pretty much puts us in a place where we are unsafe. We are targeted constantly. Because the thing is, a white trans person can go and find that housing and live by themselves or with a roommate and be accepted for who they are. And also not be targeted because they're not a random person walking the street. I mean, Black trans women, even here in New York, as of 2021, have been targeted just for carrying condoms around. We have been systemically oppressed. We have been systemically stigmatized. So that's going to continue until we say reverse certain laws, which has happened here in New York. But if we're looking across the country right now, there are laws being put in place that are, again, oppressing us, our existence illegal, and further stigmatizing who we are.
Hope, anti-trans violence is underreported, often due to victims being misgendered by police and by media, for that matter. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that happens and why that's important to think about?
So first and foremost, it happens because of the bigotry within our social culture, no matter what the race or, the religious background of a lot of folks. I think that socially, we've all decided that, trans people, their identities and their pronouns are, of no use to us, especially after someone has passed. And so what a lot of times folks will see is that families who do come and claim the bodies, because oftentimes our bodies are not claimed even by family, the families that do come and claim the body will then thrust upon us what they wish we would have lived as, right? So you might have a mom that will come and say, although I know that you lived as Tanya, I birthed you as Tori or Tony or whatever, male centric name that she gave her child. And that will be what they give to the police. Or, you just have some police that will look at genitalia upon getting to the scene and say, okay, well, this man was gunned down, even though it is very clear that this person lived as a woman or was transgender. There are so many things that happen in this particular case on a regular basis. The reason why we need to look at this is because it skews the numbers. Late in the year last year, there was a popular TikToker who went viral because of these numbers, right? She said, I wanted to do my research. I wanted to be on y'all's side. I really wanted to do it, but now look up the numbers and only 40 something of you all at the time, had been killed. And what I think that's important for a lot of folks, like, the people on the opposition, like this young woman, and so many people who agreed and shared that video to know is those numbers are skewed. First and foremost, we just started getting folks to actually care about doing surveys around here. But then on top of that, to actually have people gender us correctly is a whole other task that we can never be responsible for. If a family comes forward and says one thing, that's what the police and the press and everyone else is going with, until you have friends, people who are chosen family that come and re-identify that person. And sometimes that's not respected because they are not blood family or blood relatives. So these are things that we have to be cognizant of when we're talking about the numbers, and especially as we're talking about the violence that happens towards people who are already marginalized being identified by other people who do not like the folks within that marginalization or that marginal group.
Honestly, we should have used a condom, but we got distracted.
Another piece of this, and Hope I won't give you the first stab at this, that's happening. Another piece of this is the rise in anti-trans legislation. We've seen so many bills rising in the last year, many against anti-trans youth, and also the discourse that accompanies it. Oh my God, our basketball teams are being taken over. Oh my God, you know, it's a fascinating conversation, and I'm not sure why we're so obsessed with it. Can you help me understand, first of all, the anti-trans legislation? Help me understand that part of it first.
Well, first and foremost, I think that if people can control the social conversation, they control the conversation at large, right? And what we all know, especially as Black folk, is that the government wants to take our noses out of the business of the government and put our noses somewhere else where it's a little bit less, defined and annoying for them. And while a lot of the things that a lot of the right-wing hoteps might say, go above and beyond my head and my ear scope, one of the things that I definitely do agree is that if I can get my oppressors to argue about something that's so minuscule that it keeps them occupied over here while I do this other, set of ridiculous, egregious things, then let's do something that everybody can agree on. And once again, it goes back to that social commentary of people, especially within our community, agreeing that queer, LGBT folk, especially those who are Black and those who are visibly Black, right? We are disposable. These conversations happen whether we want to talk about it in our legislation. These conversations happen in the ways in which we pick our government officials that we vote for. It happens in the ways that we see, our clerks at the local Walmart or the local Target. All of these things are happening, and they're happening in ways that feel minute, right, to certain groups of people, but feel super magnanimous to other groups of people. And I say this because a lot of Black people will say, well, you LGBT people get whatever you want. Y'all are getting a new thing passed every single day. But once again, and I think that this is not something that Black folks have not heard, is that, hello, y'all remember that line? Hello, still Black, right? And so when I wake up in the morning, me being a Black trans woman does not erase the fact that I am still a Black person in America, and I still have to deal with the woes of what it means to be Black first, because that's a line that we all love to use, is the Black first, right? But outside of that, I think that this conversation is sort of blowing up outside of the legislative mark, is that when we're talking about the protect the children thing, right, that Black people feel like we have to do until we talk about letting them watch, love and hip hop and every other thing on the internet and the television. That's not good for them, right? Like all of this protect the Black children movement goes into that, right? It gives us something to fight for without having to actually hold up a lot of argument, because once again, this is something that like everybody can agree on, right? We want to protect children. This is not a thing that's safe for the children. And so I don't have to know statistics and numbers, because all I have to say is that I feel like children are in danger, and there are 50,000 more people behind me who are going to get on the bandwagon simply because of that. I have to move away from that culture.
Devin Norell, I got literally 1 minute, and I hate that I only have 1 minute, but I want to give you the last word. Much of the conversation around trans rights, trans activism, anti-trans violence, it's often directed toward trans women in the public conversation. What can we say about trans men, particularly Black trans men, in terms of where they are, what the circumstances are, or is there anything distinct that we should be thinking about when we talk about the rights, the needs, in the fight for justice?
Oh, absolutely. I think that quite often for Black trans masculine people, crimes against them go underreported, specifically because of dead naming, misgendering, which happens more than often. I think of Kai Peterson, who recently was released from jail, and the fact that he was put there because he was defending himself after being sexually assaulted. But this happens so constantly within our community, and these people are sadly erased because they are not considered trans or not reported as trans, et cetera. So I think we need to pay more attention to, or at least listen to the people that are surrounding them that say, these folks are trans. And I say this as a journalist and someone who writes myself. When we are reporting, we need to share responsibility and making sure that we are reporting the right names and gender of these folks. And so that I think eventually we will come to see that trans masculine people are also being attacked at very high rates. Probably not as comparable to Black trans women, but definitely at high rates. And I've heard enough within my community where people are constantly complaining and feeling like they cannot report instances of sexual assault to police or even to friends because we're expected to just deal with it. And that is just a part of trans misogyny and misogyny as well, and misogynoir, And so hopefully we can address all these things and then we can move on from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hope Giselle, Devin Norell, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure having you on Black News tonight. As always, thank you for your insights.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was just an informative. You can definitely sound off in the comments if you'd like, but I'm gonna go ahead and take it in for the night. If you are the replay gang, thank you for coming out and watching. I appreciate you. Have a great night.